This episode's sponsored by Vorbos. Check them out in the description below.
In terms of the production, do you remember what the budget was?
You know what? If I was to take a shot, I'd say it was somewhere between maybe £4,000 and £8,000.
Right. And so, how did you get the money? Was that the church, or was that like a donation thing, or?
No, here's a good story.
Yeah.
So when I was doing Shakespeare Behind the Door, we did a performance, and friends and family could come and watch it. And after we had a little bit of time to talk to everybody, and I was talking to some guy, Mark Woodruff, and he worked at the Sainsbury's Trust, which is a trust fund that supports a lot of work in Africa and Asia, and do some incredible work. And he said to me after, look, we stay in touch. I'd love to kind of see your journey and where you go. It's as simple as that. You know what I mean? Gave me his card. And when I was putting on the production, I knew that we needed some money. So I looked at his card and I thought, let me shoot this geezer an email and see if he can give us some money. So I emailed him and I said, look, I'm putting on a play with some young people, whatever, da-da-da-da-da. And he said to me, all right, cool. Send me 1 page on A4 paper of what it is you want to do. That was it. I said, that's it. He said, yeah, that's it. So I typed up what I was trying to do, sent it to him, and then he gave us £10,000.
Come on.
Okay.
Yeah,
Come on.
he gave us 30,000 over 3 years, so 10,000 a year, and that was the seed funding for intermission.
Did he say up front, I'm going to give you 30 for 3 years, or was it like each year you'd go back to him?
No,
and
he said up front, we'll give you, the Sainsbury's Trust will give you a tranche of 30,000, 10,000 each year. And that was just from somebody I spoke to after, again, similar to...
Just from asking?
Yeah, just from asking, yeah. And that's how the whole youth, that was the springboard for it.
Taking it to the beginning in terms of getting started, everyone, I think the first question they'll have is, okay, so money, how did you get the startup capital? What was that spent on?
So I was always taught when I was younger to be incredibly frugal and save. So ever since I was young, I'd always been saving. I never spent on anything. My parents always said, you can't buy something new, go on eBay, go and find it for a better price. So that was always drilled into me. So from initially when I started selling bread, I did it just from a few pounds. And then through savings from grandparents giving £50 at Christmas and money as well that I'd made through bread, I started buying things from Poundland. So I used to pass it every day going to school. And I knew how to buy on eBay, and I thought about, actually, should I start trying to sell something? And because Poundland was buying product, end-of-line product at the time, there was a lot of good deals because they had to sell everything for £1, but the actual value of those products was normally far, far greater.
And for anyone listening at home, just quickly, what's an end-of-line product?
So an end-of-line product is a product that is being sold potentially by another business when they go bust. So they're picking up these bargains for probably 20p to the pound. And then Poundland was selling them obviously for £1, but the normal retail value of these products might have been about £15. So an example would be a sushi making kit, and I was buying them from Poundland and selling them for £10 on eBay.
That sounds like the early days of Amazon FBA, to be honest with you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think the value of money has always been something that we've held very closely. So we have completely bootstrapped the whole business up until the point where we got to today. And part of that as well, as Monty said, growing up, money was incredibly important. He was very frugal, with money growing up. And it was similar to me, where my parents at the age of 15 told me that they weren't giving me any more money for anything and I had to go and get a job. So very early on, even before that, we realised the value of money and how important it was, and to spend it wisely. And that sort of prompted everything going forward in terms of what we do, who we are and where we spend our money, because we had to make profit in order to go to that next level. And so we've always been incredibly frugal.
And so how much startup capital was required right at the beginning?
Literally pounds.
Okay.
So yeah, really, really nothing. In terms of Furniture Box though, all of the money that I'd accumulated through trading from an early age was then invested into Furniture Box, into buying stock. So we had age on our side, so the accumulating effect of starting so young and not having any outgoings as well, when it's compounding in terms of investing in stock, reselling it, was fairly large. So I didn't have any overheads to begin with. So I was fortunate to be able to to then invest that money into Furniture Box. And it's something that we've always wanted to maintain in terms of not taking outside investment. Because we find that when it's your own money, you really know how to look after it, where to spend it. You understand where the profit is coming from in the business and where you might be also leaking and you're less careless. That's always been our philosophy.
So obviously one of the main points about Pouch is that you went on Dragon's Den.
I did.
And you
got
didn't
dragged.
just go on, you got all 5 dragons
Yes.
on board, which is quite a big achievement. Not many people have that happen.
At the time, we were the second company to have done that, and there had been 15 or 16 seasons. So we certainly weren't geared up for that kind of result because it hadn't happened before. We were mainly interested in just being televised, because most pitches that happen, it's all filmed over 3 months in Manchester at BBC Studios, but most of the pitches are either not interesting enough to get televised. The only ones that do are the really good ones or the really bad ones, kind of like X Factor or something like that. So our biggest priority was like, okay, how do we get televised? Well, usually the companies that get offers get televised. We knew that we weren't going to get laughed out of the room. It was impossible. The idea was too good. We'd already got some traction. The only way that it would go badly for us is if we were really greedy with our equity demands or our valuation, which can get a lot of founders unstuck, because there is this sweet spot on that show. If you monitor it, as we did very carefully, that if you go in at a realistic, actually not even a realistic valuation, a very low valuation, then the questions are not really about the numbers, the valuation, your margins, like anything that some founders start sweating about. And then that's when the cameras get you, because it's a 2.5 hour pitch.
Oh, is it?
And it's condensed into about 11 minutes.
Wow.
So if you fuck up once in 2.5 hours,
they'll use
that's the moment. That's the money
okay.
shot, right? So we were keen for the pitch not to be about our numbers, because at the time, whilst we had a lot of traction with retailers, we had very few users. I think we maybe had like 2,000 or 3,000 users. It was not. We'd only launched, a few months before, so we knew it wasn't going to be about that. We knew the model was good in terms of the revenue model was good, but in terms of our actual numbers, how can you say that you're worth 2 million quid if you've got like 2,000 users? Get the fuck out of here, you're arseholes. And then that's what gets filmed. If we came in at a very low valuation from memory, because this was filmed about 5 years ago now. From memory, it was £75,000 for 15% of the business. We already had raised at a much higher valuation than that before.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you go in looking for dragons, or was it a publicity?
No, it was totally publicity.
I was wondering that.
Right, yeah. But look, 85% of the deals that go through on that show never materialize.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And there's a couple of reasons why. One is that the founders that go on the show were lying about the numbers. Then the dragons and their teams look under the hood and they go, this is all bullshit. Or in what happens in most cases, you then leverage the fact you're going on Dragon's Den, because it gets filmed, but when it gets televised, it's like maybe 6 or 8 months. You then leverage that as a huge marketing coup to then raise at a much higher valuation, and then you bin the dragons off. The BBC don't care because it's all content. The dragons don't care because I don't think they're even interested in the businesses that they invest in.
Yeah.
So yeah, we knew that. Look, you guys are business people. You know that the valuations on that show are like far lower than the street.
Yeah.
Because how are they going to be able to, in a 2-hour pitch, without seeing the product, like understand the value of the technology, understand the value of the team, understand the value of the potential, the market, whatever it is. So we just thought, look, if we're never going to take their fucking money anyway,
Let's play the game.
let's play the game. Value ourselves at like 400 grand, even though the round before we'd raised at like, I think 1.2 million or something.
Okay.
And then the subsequent round was like a much higher valuation than that. And just play the game. And I think that's one of the reasons why it worked for us, because if you look at the questions that were asked of us by the dragons on that episode, none of them were really about the numbers. They did ask us numbers, but none of that was televised. But it was more about the vision, the team, the opportunity. Some questions around whether retailers would like a product like Pouch, because there was a big question mark over but whether a tool like Pouch can provide incremental value to retailers, because if you're providing a user a discount when they're already on the website, that's problematic, because you're just like kneecapping the retailer on their own website.
Going back to the funding side, obviously you had a slightly unique situation in that you had relationships in the asset management industry before going into it. But what would be your advice to somebody who was actually wanting to get funding for an idea that didn't have those connections?
Yeah, so I mean it was sort of we only did a little bit of angel funding there, so that wasn't, I wouldn't say that was kind of the core to the funding journey, but I mean really the way that we raised money through actually most of the journey, but definitely at the beginning, was just like relentlessly reaching out to people. So like one of my investors jokes that over 3 years I sent him 15 emails until we finally went for breakfast, and then he invested and has been one of like the most brilliant investors for the last kind of 2-3 years.
Was that 15 emails, by the way, of him not replying?
Correct.
Wow. I love that.
And yeah, so the advice I would give, or I guess what I did was just message like as many people as you can, as much as you can. Like I would just sit on LinkedIn like late at night, just going through anyone that had the investor in their in their name and their titles, and see people. I've invested in one other startup business, a small amount, and so I see people do that to me now. So people have searched investor.
Just by the way, just on that, what do you think is the line? Because I think a lot of people worry like, well, I don't want to become someone where they blacklist me because they're like, oh, this is the guy that emails everyone, as opposed to this guy's persistent. And I think that's a really fine line. What do you think about that?
I don't know if I mean there will always be people that will ignore you, and there's always going to be people that are blacklist, but ultimately investment's like a numbers game, right? Even when you're pitching the VCs, you've got to pitch 100 to get 5 meetings, or and that's just the way, it's just a funnel, like so yeah, I think and also there's probably a line between sort of being polite and being, so if you're politely emailing, then I don't think anyone can do too
Listen,
much.
mate, this is my 12th email, all right? Get on it.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, sort of just going for it. I mean, one of the things about 3 years ago, I emailed one of the co-founders of Booking.com on LinkedIn, and just sort of did like a cold LinkedIn message and was like, oh, I'm just such a huge fan of Booking.com, and we're trying to do something similar in the venue space, and we'd absolutely love to to meet you for coffee, or pick your brains, whatever. And he replied back to me and he said, well, since I'm based in Amsterdam, if you're ever here, then feel free to drop in for coffee. So I just booked a flight the next day. And
I was going to say, I hope she said she booked a flight.
I didn't want to test it.
That's so great.
Yeah, and he
I'm
said,
here.
I'm free for coffee. I said, I'm free on Tuesday. I think this was the sort of Friday or something. He said, yeah, Tuesday at 2 is good. And I just got on a flight like 5 a.m, got to Amsterdam, went for coffee, and came back. And it was a brilliant few hours. So he didn't become an investor, but I got to learn
it's a valuable
huge amount about
sure.
Booking.com.
Okay.
So with Charged Up, so obviously going back to the beginning, you're at Lord's, your phone dies, you buy this power bank, you see the Boris bike, you're on a Boris bike, you have that kind of the big brainwave.
Yep.
What's the next step? Do you call someone? Do you run it by someone? Do you call a manufacturer? I mean, what's the very first thing that you did when you got home?
Yeah, so this is kind of a few years before graduating. I was, had this kind of initial idea. So first idea was very basic. It was, why don't we make vending machines that vend out power banks that are fully charged with the cables, all this kind of stuff. So, start looking on like Alibaba and stuff. Can you make a power, is there such thing as a vending machine for power banks? Anyway, nothing really exists. So we're looking on the market, like what exists in the market, doing a bit of research, etc. This is all while, doing engineering at uni. The only thing that existed on the market was these charging lockers. And if you remember way back in the day, you'd go into like a Westfield or somewhere and you'd just lock your phone away.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's kind of all that existed. And I was like, surely there has to be a better way. Anyway, so we start trying to build this vending machine thing, like physically with 3D printers, motors, all this kind of stuff, in our university lab, which was quite a lot of fun.
And who's we, by the way?
So just me and a few friends from uni, basically.
Okay.
So we start trying to do that. Obviously, that's never going to be the end business, but I think there's this kind of beautiful combination of naivety and optimism that comes together when you're super young and you're first getting into something. that meant that, you know, I kind of thought that that could be the way to get to a business. But anyway, so we start building this thing and we start like pitching it to people, one of which was our kind of business professor or whatever you want to call him at the university. And he said, basically, great idea here, guys. You know, I love the enthusiasm, etc. But basically, if you can prove to me that people will pay for this thing, I will give you $2,500. Well, I will give you $2,500 equity free for absolutely nothing to go out and prove if people will pay for this. And then I'll give you another $2,500 to kind of take it to the next step. Yeah. And so, you know, like very, very early on, someone being like, you need to go out and like prove that this is something that people will pay for, I think was like one of the most invaluable lessons that we were taught like super early days. And this dude, Joe Pierce, he's, you know, I'm still in touch with him now. He's a great guy. That was like a really, really significant moment. He sat us down and made us think, like, how do you go from absolutely nothing to something that people will be willing to pay for with $2,500? Like most businesses, you can't do that.
Yeah, that's peanuts.
Yeah. I know,
it's nothing.
It really is nothing. So obviously, there's no way we can build an app with that. We can't find a manufacturing partner and all this kind of stuff. So we have to go like super, super basic, like boil down the idea to the most minimum viable product possible. And for us, that was to buy some power banks off eBay or Amazon or whatever, put numbers on all of them, and then make like a little, you know, tracking sheet on Google Sheets or whatever. Yeah. And go to a festival. We managed to hustle our way into a festival for free. And we had a stand at this festival. And
Can I ask what festival it was?
It was the most rogue festival. Like, it wasn't a cool festival. Okay. It was like the agricultural show in Cornwall.
Okay. There's a reason you got in there for free, basically, is what you're saying.
I think Kanye was headlining.
Yeah, on his JCB tractor or whatever. Like, it was seriously rogue. But anyway, you know, there's all these thousands of people. So we were sat there in the pouring rain. There's some great photos of us there with our little power banks, and we had a little iZettle card machine to take their money. And yeah, we rented out these things, and I think we were charging £10 to borrow it, and then if you returned it, you got a bit of a refund kind of thing. Super like basic setup, but we made $2,000 over that weekend.
Okay, wow.
And obviously, it's not scalable to have 3 people sat there at a stand all the time doing this. But it proved the concept that people want to pay to charge their phone, and this idea that you know, if you pay, then you borrow the battery and then you return it. That kind of came true, even though we were the machine that was kind of renting and returning the batteries.
Yeah. So obviously you mentioned Kickstarter, which I think is quite a unique way of going about it. We've never had a founder before that's gone through Kickstarter.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I find that really cool. So what take me through that? What made you want to go via Kickstarter?
So I did a Kickstarter campaign actually too before this business, but for my previous job, and they all went really successfully. So I already have experience with Kickstarter crowdfunding. And around that time, this project was not set up to be I didn't intend to be a full-time job. I was just trying to validate the idea to see if this could be my side project. And Kickstarter tend to be the best way to test if your idea can gain some momentum, can be well perceived and well received by a wider audience. And Kickstarter is the largest product-based crowdfunding platform in the world. They have over millions like users across the whole world. There's no other cheaper way than putting your idea out there to let other people judge it.
And what was the response like when you first launched Kickstarter campaign?
We become the most backed power project in the UK after 30 days.
Wow.
And it broke the record in the UK.
So that's product market fit sorted.
Yeah, I think that's covered.
Yeah.
Men's balls were crying out across the nation.
Exactly.
That's great. And how did you, is it a case of like you just put it on Kickstarter and then it just does its thing, or did you have to promote the Kickstarter?
Yeah, it took me probably 10 months to prepping for that campaign. That included a lot of things from marketing to early users, like beta testing or alpha testing, very precisely. So in that process, I was doing concept development and sampling, and also sorting out of like manufacturer supply chain to try to get that minimum order done. And what I initially set up the goal is I think it's 20K or maybe 15,000 pound, so that I can create the first minimum order quantity with the manufacturer, and it ended up we got in total probably almost over 150,000 pound of pre-orders.
Wow.
From 63 countries across the world.
63.
Yeah.
And you haven't made a single pair of underwear at this point?
No.
That's insane.
Not at, I made the samples,
Yeah.
but never commercialized.
Sure.
That's another thing is that I'm in that process. I probably made over 60 samples. That's a lot of samples. I'm so obsessed into product because I really, really believe if you want to create a really good brand, you not only the first thing you have to crack the code is you need to have amazing product that outperform other competitors.
Sure.
No, definitely. So if somebody was listening to this and they have an idea for a business and they're thinking of going through Kickstarter as a way to get it going, what would be your advice to somebody?
Well,
specifically for Kickstarter.
Well, first they have to be a product-based business. It can be underwear, can be a sneaker, can be a cooler, and can be a card. Actually, has to be physical product. And second, I think the secret sauce for us to get successful is creating that mailing list, generating a really growing, pumping up people's excitement in advance about the product, and then turning these people into your brand advocate. Because at that time we did every single friends or people on the mailing list. All I want them to do is, can you tell 2 of your friends?
Yeah.
Yeah. And think about the compound impact.
Yeah, it kind of explodes from that.
I think a lot of people would be curious to know about the pitching process and how that works and how you best convince people to give you. I mean, it's a lot of money we're talking about.
Yeah, scary amount. It's the thing I hate most about being a founder, because you are, especially in the very early stages, you're putting yourself out there and basically asking people to believe in you, and you get a lot of no's. And even though both of our rounds have actually been very easy in inverted commas and straightforward, you still get no's, and that is a quite emotionally challenging point, because at that point people are saying, no, I don't believe that you can do this personally. And really then it's about you need a few prerequisites, I guess, that are necessary, not necessarily sufficient, but necessary for raising funding. So a market. You need to be in a market that works for venture capital. And so that basically needs to be a big market where there's money to be made. You need a team, or at least there's the signs that you can build a strong team. And specifically something within that team that shows that you have an edge over everyone else, what is special about you. And then some evidence that you can execute. Early stages, that's obviously a much lower bar than at later stages. Those are the sort of key conditions, I think, that are important, that are necessary. And then you have to go out and raise a process, and run a process. And you talk to 100 firms, whittle them down like a funnel, and go from there.
And what were the main reservations from the VCs that you spoke to?
A couple of things. One was, what do you know about logistics? Which is true and fair, and really comes back to that point that I talked about originally, that I think coming in with a fresh view is useful. And we see that over and over again now. We obviously hire tech people, we hire logistics people, and often is a big struggle to get logistics people to say, what else could you do, or could you do things in a different way? And the second is, there are many VCs and firms out there that will only invest in software companies. We are an operationally heavy company. We go and do deliveries. We have vans. We have drivers. There is a huge market here, and we believe that is how we take that market. But if you want to invest in software with 95% plus margins, then you're not going to invest in something like Athlete.
What's it like having that much money invested in your idea? Because I feel like that's quite a lot of pressure. I mean, with our studio business, for example, we're self-funded. But I mean, I can imagine that when you have other people's money, especially when it's 7 figures, I mean, I don't know. I feel like that might keep me up a little bit at night with the pressure of like, I got to make this work. What's that like? Yeah, like
terrifying broadly, I think would be the way I describe it. I go backwards and forwards on it. I go at one extreme, terrifying. What are we doing? Like, we've raised all this money. It's just a crazy amount of money, and it's still a relatively small amount of money in the VC world, but a crazy amount of money for us. And then on the other side is, the VCs invest money. This is their job. They know what they're doing. This is a tiny amount of the VC capital that's out there. No pressure. And it's sort of broadly try and end up somewhere in the middle of that, which I think is probably the healthy place. But yeah, it definitely is. And actually now that pressure grows over time, not just because of the money you raise, but now we have a business that employs 100 people. And a team and merchants and customers, right? In those early days, I thought, okay, I'll give this a go for a month or two, see if there are legs and see if this works. And if it doesn't, then the worst thing that happens is they have to go back to DPD or whoever they're using. But now we have people who switched everything to us, small businesses that use us for their whole operations from a logistical delivery point of view.
For anyone that hasn't seen The Dragon's Den, you did get all 5 offers and you ended up accepting a split between Peter Jones and Stephen
That was nuts,
Bartlett.
right?
That's pretty insane.
Pretty crazy.
It was pretty
And
cool.
even today, you guys still find that crazy, do you not?
I want to do it again.
Yeah.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
Touching on the Dragon's Den process, because we've had guests before that have been on Dragon's Den, and actually one of our older guests also got 5 offers, and he was saying how the pitch process is actually like 2.5 hours, and it's like a long game.
Yeah.
It's funny because we saw so many comments afterwards that were like, seriously, they got 5 offers after 14 minutes of pitching. That's it. And people don't see that we were in there for an hour and a half and they're grilling you. I mean, there is no break. Poor Teddy was so ill at the time. And
You hit that very well, by the way.
Really?
I would never have
I had Glenn.
Yeah, I didn't clock.
I
We
would
nearly
never
pulled out the morning of.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
he was so sick and he kept on taking water breaks. But besides that was it. I mean, we were, it was ruthless.
What sort of questions were they asking you? Off air?
Oh, okay, the kind of questions that you didn't see if you'd watched our episode. There were a few questions around like exit strategy that weren't included. There were a few more questions into the financials. I think, again, to Marissa's point about people thinking that we got 5 offers after 14 minutes was, and then there were some comments like, we didn't even ask them about the financials. Marissa and I both have sort of finance, private equity background. So for us, the financial piece, we went in there and we knew our numbers. That was one thing that we were going to go in and do, was smash our numbers and then defend the brand.
I have heard that if you're going to go on Dragon's Den, know your numbers.
I feel like that's the area that most people fall down on.
Yeah.
The numbers when they stutter on it.
Or they go in with like a ludicrous
Or
valuation.
they go with the ludicrous
or a
valuation,
figure.
which is just no.
How do you know you're ready, and how do you pick the number?
I suppose, kind of everything surrounding that number.
Okay,
So
okay.
finding actually the investors, finding the valuation, actually going out
Right,
pitching,
okay.
putting pitch decks together, everything around the investment process, I think would be really interesting to get.
Okay, so
clarity on.
step one, generally you raise money because you need money. So we were in a position where we weren't yet profitable. Like making the business profitable, we were at the early enough stage that making the business profitable was really unattractive. Whereas now it'd be like, okay, we could make the business profitable, but like we'd have to hold back a few hires or something like that, right? At that point,
we kind of try and run at break even more so. Whereas then we were very much in the sort of venture playbook of like, you raise, you burn, you grow, you raise, you burn, you grow. And
So,
it's just like,
so part of it was like, okay, we are coming to we have a finite runway as it stands, and we have X amount of time before we either need to really change course or bring more money in. And then we kind of look at, okay, we can see what levers are working. We can see what kind of headroom we have. We can see what the blockers in the business are just from operating it. In our case, it's like, okay, we think we need to improve the tech of the product. That means a reasonable rate we think we can grow the tech team without it being too disruptive would be 3 more developers or something. And you just pop it, literally make a financial model and you work out, this is roughly the amount I need. And honestly, like the whole process of like how you approach venture approach we'll come to, but the finance of it is, it's, some people say more art than science. It's not even art and science, it's just heuristics. It's like, what is the amount of money that you reasonably need to give you 18 months to 2 years of runway? Some people say to hit certain milestones, really it's 18 months to 2 years of runway or into profitability. And obviously you should achieve some good stuff in that 18 to 24 months or be profitable. Those are your 2 choices. So that's one part. Then the other part is, depending on your stage as a business, and depending on how large the market is that you're attacking, this, let's say that, in our case, we're not idiots. Like, we're not trying to, we're not.
that's the impression we like to get.
Join us after the break.
Clickbait. Are they idiots?
YouTube thumbnail. We're not gonna make a case unless it's around product expansion, new services, blah blah blah. We're not gonna make a case to investors like, oh, we're gonna turn over $1 billion doing this thing that we're doing now, right? So you need to kind of, and we are also a business, and it's more European than American thing that has real turnover. So then those two things kind of say like, okay, you can have a certain acceptable range multiple of your current revenue, right? And
what is that range out of interest?
I would say in the current market,
it depends. It does depend on the market.
It hugely depends, right? And like I said, like it also depends how big and how big the market is that you're attacking and how quickly you're growing. Because if you're attacking a ridiculously huge market and you're growing ridiculously quickly, you have really strong signs of product market fit, you're like a relatively unique business who's well positioned, the multiple could be irrelevant. You could be turning over 500K and raise 100 million, right? But if you're if you're doing real traction and you don't have a very clear argument as to how you're going to turn over 10 billion, you're more saying like, okay, I'm going to turn over 100 to 200 million, then you do have kind of more bounds that are like multiples of your revenue. Mm-hmm. And then also basically the other thing is the valuation basically is, well, if you're doing, I'd say the absolute minimum 5% is like you don't do a round for less than 5%. And at the absolute max 20, maybe 25%. And so between those 3 or 4 things, you kind of numbers pop out, right?
You sort of do work it backwards from how much you're prepared to give away and how much you need, right? Is what you're saying.
So we would look at the financial model. It would say like, okay, we need about, and the other factor is how much interest is there. But we'd look at the model and be like, okay, we can make 1 to 3 million work. We're willing to give away 15%ish, something like that, or 15 to 20 maybe. And I said 5. 5 is actually really low. It's more like 10 to 20 is the normal barriers. And this is roughly how much we're turning over. So we think we could justify a valuation that's a multiple of X. So let's say pre-market collapse, if you're a real business doing real turnover, 10 to 20X, or even less, maybe like 8 to 15X, pretty reasonable. Current circumstances, maybe more like 5 to 12.
And that would just be off the top line. The turnover.
Yeah, turnover.
Okay.
Depends a little bit on
your business.
Luckily,
bit,
I mean,
right?
our top line sort of correlates pretty much like 1 to 2 with our like net revenue.
Okay.
What I mean by that is like
net revenue or gross profit. I get confused.
Let's not go there.
Yeah.
Business 101. Just depends on your accounting sort of principles. But more the point was just like, because we take fairly high margin, as we were discussing earlier in the episode. Our gross revenue top line is pretty well connected to what we're actually doing as a business. Whereas if you were a marketplace that got like a 5% margin and you were trying to multiply your top line,
then it'd be nonsense. Airbnb obviously shouldn't do the transaction value. The other thing is that we agree with our host to pay them a fixed amount. Right. So when we do product changes that increase the amount that we charge customers, we actually retain more of it. So it's a little different. Our reporting isn't quite like other marketplaces. It is more relevant to report the top line transaction value. Mm-hmm. But yeah, basically those are some multiple. I'm not really an expert in that stuff. That's kind of, I think it's something like that at the moment. I don't know.
Can you talk to going into pitches? Sort of what the experience has been for you going into pitches and what kind of advice you give to people when it comes to raising funding? I think it's quite a daunting process for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I will be completely honest, I didn't do much of the pitching. I'm an uneducated female, young female from southeast London, and I did not suit those investor conversations really. So my co-founder did it. He's a privately educated male accountant who knows exactly what he's talking about. So I'd come in for the kind of second meetings or third meetings.
Do you have any regrets about not going into this?
Not really, because I was focused on the business. I was focused on the operations, the team, the customer service, the product that we were building. And fundraising is a full-time job. And that was basically his job, was fundraising and having all those conversations. And I would not have wanted to do that job at the time. I really enjoyed my job. And I don't regret it.
Have you played more part of the funding since?
I have. I think it's really difficult for like a solo founder to fundraise, because for us it was clear he does the fundraising, I'm working on the business, and they are both 2 very, very big jobs. If you've got one person trying to do it all, I feel so sorry for them, because it must just be so incredibly difficult to do that. And I think the process itself of raising capital can get easier. There's got to be a better way for businesses to do it.
on like both ends of the spectrum, investment firms and startups. There's got to be a better way. And there's a few. So there's a platform that tries to match VCs and startups. Maybe that's the future. There's obviously like Seeders and Crowdcube where you can actually go out to the crowd. There's a few things popping up in that space. I'm not totally sure that we've completely cracked it yet.
Yeah, sure. Because I can see you're now on the other side of it. You're investing in business yourself.
Yes. Well, I'm doing a stint at a consumer VC/growth firm. So they invest in consumer focused businesses, fantastic brands that you will have known about. And yeah, so I'm kind of on the other side of the table because for me it was such a daunting prospect, and I did feel in some conversations that I was not welcome and I did not feel at home or at ease. A bit like this, joking.
That's 3 jokes. People are gonna think you're serious.
Yeah, and so I guess I think the best way to learn is by seeing it from someone else's perspective. And now I look at a lot of pitch decks and speak to a lot of founders, and I'm just kind of getting exposure to that side of things.
When you say you didn't feel welcome in a lot of situations, what do you mean by that exactly? Can you elaborate a little bit?
I don't think I fitted the idea of what a founder should be.
What did they think the idea of a founder should be?
Well, I risk getting a bit sexist here, but I think they expected me to be male, and there is actually there is research that shows that the conversations that an investor will ask a man is very different to the questions that they'll ask a woman. So they'll ask a male about vision, growth, the future. They will ask a female about the problems, and so naturally, the female is talking about all the problems, and the male is talking about
where it's going to go,
the space, Elon Musk type thing.
Yeah.
And there's research that shows that, and I think coming across pieces of research like that makes me feel a little bit more like it wasn't all just in my head, and that it is actually a thing. I think we have a lot of. This is not just investors versus founders. This is, as a society, we have a lot of biases that we maybe will overcome at some point, but I don't think we will in my lifetime.
In terms of the pitch, were you going into these rooms with these investors when you secured meetings? Were you pitching by yourself or with your other co-founders?
I think about myself. I think we found between 3 of us, I actually quite enjoy it, and it also meant that the other guys could just focus on building the product and building the company. And actually, to this date, that's how we do fundraising. They don't do any of the fundraising. I do it. They focus on building the business. Because the problem is we can't just stop running the business when I'm fundraising. So we keep the business going, and it sort of suits the personality. You talk to Thesa and Harry, like, I never want to do fundraising ever. I'm so glad you're doing it. They might come and join for the final sort of investment committee, but at that point, it's more of a, hey, they're real people. Yeah, you can meet them, but it's less of them pitching.
The obvious worry I would think about in that is that what if you get asked something that's too technical or too financial that isn't your area of expertise and something, how do you answer that if they're not there? How would you tackle that?
To be honest, I know most of it myself to the level of a VC asking it. Like they're not, and actually I would say that because I was pretty heavily involved in building everything from scratch. Like I know quite a little all the way down to the ISO codes we get from MasterCard. I'm pretty familiar with what we get, and trust me, no VCs understand what happens on the ISO codes in the network. So I feel like I have enough deep knowledge across credit underwriting, financial crime, how financial services, so how credit card unit economics work, as well as how our credit card works as well, to be able to answer. I've never had an issue where I couldn't answer a question.
Do you have any advice on how to successfully pitch those kinds of rooms?
I found the biggest thing for me was actually just not using a pitch deck. And part of that for me was, well, actually, I'll go back to it. I think the pitch to the investment committee is actually not the most important pitch. The pitch is the initial coffee chat you have, the walking meeting you have. Those are, for me, are the most important meetings, because ultimately when you get to investment committee, you've already got a general partner championing the deal. And so I'm not saying the investment committee doesn't matter, but I would say that getting that investment committee is the hard part. Actually, most entrepreneurs, if you ask them, or most founders, and you speak to them, getting to IC is the hard part, like getting to that stage. It's every single call before that, they can't even get past those stages. And I think a lot of it for me was going, actually, how do I pitch really well? It's a conversation. It's not me pitching at them. And I think the best pitches I've had is like, let's just go for a walk. Let me tell you about what we're building. Let's just have a chat. Let's have a conversation and tell you about what we're building. And hopefully you get excited by it. And if you don't, then maybe it's not a good fit for you and I. And feeling more comfortable saying, this isn't a good fit for you as well. Because if you're not excited by it, I don't really want to work with you either.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of getting more comfortable with just going for a walk. And I always say that, if you think about it, if you meet an investor at a coffee shop, it's pretty weird if you just unleash a pitch deck and start pitching at them at a coffee shop. You kind of want to just have a conversation.
Sure.
And for me, a great pitch is a conversation and a dialogue. And your first meeting is to get the next meeting. It's not to try and close a deal on the spot. It's to get them excited enough about what you're building, your ambition, the product you're building, the team you have, the mission you have, to get them excited by it. And I think that's much better done through a conversation than a pitch.
So would you suggest when founders that are looking to potentially raise funding and reach out to VCs, when they send that initial cold email or maybe even cold LinkedIn message, whatever it might be, would you recommend them sort of suggesting, I'd love to take you for coffee and have a chat with you?
Yeah, I'd backtrack. I would generally say warm intros are always 10 times better than cold emails. I never have successfully had a meeting through a cold email.
Interesting.
But I would say, speaking a bit from privilege, because we were very fortunate to have very great tier 1 seed investors. So they did all the introductions for me to any other investors. And most of the conversations I've had are generally funds reaching out to us. But I would say the chicken egg problem is, well, how do you get started?
That was what I was about to ask.
Like, and I remember the first thing I thought about like 3 years ago was like, okay, you need to get warm intros. I'm like, how? I don't have a network of investors to speak to. I just exhausted my existing network of friends and said, do you know anyone? So even for me, it was just, I had an MBA classmate and said, hey, you worked in this VC fund, can we chat? And your friends are more likely to just help you out as well. Now, none of them ever invested in the end, and none of those funds ever worked out. But at least it just got me into the front door to start having these conversations as well. But I'd always say warm intros are so much better. As maybe, people can say that cold intros, cold emails do work. They probably do, but I think your hit rate's going to be much worse. Yeah. And these investors, I mean, they get like 10, 50, 100 pitches a day. How do you filter through the noise? And even me on the recruitment side, I get a lot of people just cold emailing me about jobs at Yonder, and there's just too many now for me to read every single one and like really go through it. And so you end up using like heuristics, which is like, if it's someone I trust, refer someone to me, okay, like, I'll definitely want to have a conversation with them. I don't know if it doesn't feel fair, and I recognize that I think a lot of the diversity issues in VC is because of this problem. But I also, if you're a founder, I think you just have to recognize that this is currently how the game works. And so getting intros is much more powerful. And just exhaust every part of your network. I mean, literally, it got to a point where I think I emailed my wife's tutor who knew someone to like give me an intro. And that was still better than just cold emailing.
Yeah.
And it was hard to do it that way, but I think it's still better than just trying to do it cold.
What advice could you give to someone who's going through a funding round or looking to go through a funding round in terms of actually valuing their company and trying to decide how much A to give away and B, how much they should be raising?
I think valuing the company, just go back to fundamentally the market decides at early stage. I'm not talking about growth stage. Growth stage is a bit different, but early stage, so pre-seed, seed, the market decides your valuation. So I would generally say don't go in with this is the valuation, take it or leave it. I would actually say work backwards though from how much capital you need, and how much capital you need is what milestone do you need to hit. So if you kind of think about it, pre-seed to seed is like to go and take, an idea to like a product that you take to market. C to Series A is you've proven product market fit, really early signals of product market fit. Series A to Series B is now you've got a proven growth engine, just add capital and get more revenue and profit. So think about those sort of funding rounds as proving out your thesis, and each funding round should unlock, should sort of at each funding round, you should have had a new proof point that you've figured out. And so how much capital do you need to hit that proof point? So for us, it's like the proof point is have a credit card live in the market with customers using it. So our pre-seed needed to be large enough to get us there. Now, there were like sort of theoretical maximums. Sure, you could get 10 million, but like, no, what's the minimum amount of money you need to get that proof point of customers loving your product or just having early signal? We didn't need to have proven product market fit. We just need to have early signal that people would really like our product. And then I think in terms of dilution, quite honestly, a bit of it is market dynamics right now. Pre-seed, seed, 10, 15, 20, maybe up to 25 max is sort of the standard market terms. And then really it's just down to negotiation. And if you think about it, if you start with round size, you then figure out, a dilution you're comfortable with, that determines your valuation anyway. So especially the early stage, I think at late stage it's very different. And I think for most people here, if you're like a Series C, D company, it's a very different situation. And all of a sudden now revenue multiples, public market multiples start to matter a lot more. And I think that's quite a different game though.